at the beginning of the story for this video, we'll look at an email that I sent to the alleged Logan, Ohio Sheriff's Department, or I guess it'd be Hocking County Sheriff's Department of Ohio, their alleged main distribution email, which interestingly enough is at a .org address. Anyway, what I said is, "Hello, my name is Stephen Coleman Roush, and I would like to first state that I hope your Tuesday is going well. And as such, this email finds you well. I am reaching out regarding a troubling issue that befell my father, and a concern with the property that I grew up in on Zanesville Avenue. Here, the clarification I seek regards an alleged list of condemned buildings that apparently my father's house was put on. This news comes from an alleged code enforcement agent from the Logan City's police department. However, would not such a condemned building list fall under the purview of the Hocking County Sheriff, procedurally? In addition, there was no notice of such action being sent, and it was alleged that such an action was taken on behalf of a surveying of the outward conditions of the property. Next, if these alleged activities are true, they could constitute multiple violations of the U.S. Constitution, the Ohio Constitution, the Ohio Revised Code, and other applicable laws and procedures. Indeed, it appears many of these actions could constitute criminal activity, as detailed in Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Chapter 13, Crimes and Criminal Procedure, under Sections 241 and 242, respectively, conspiracy against rights and acting under the color of law. Such actions might also violate the constitutional clause about due process in two ways. First, no legitimate notice was delivered, a long-established tradition for the said due process. Furthermore, no warrant was issued by oath or affirmation, specifying the places to be searched or items to be seized under the authority of a constitutional jury. These and other considerations compel me to reach out and discover the truth to these activities, as I have sworn allegiance to the U.S. Constitution upon enlistment into the armed forces. While this is not an exhaustive list, and I could detail other possible violations in this context, the above mentioned are the most concerning for the forefront of this situation. Please get back to me on this topic when possible. Sincerely, Stephen Coleman Roush, Marine veteran, father, author, and linguist, as I always sign them." Now, the main point to this email was to gauge the reaction that I would get, and it is about as you'd expect. But either way, before I sent this email, we can go ahead and look at what response I got when they did not realize what position I was coming from. First, I sent an email to the alleged Chief Deputy Leif P. Bickle. And the response that I got back was, "Mr. Coleman Roush, first off, thank you for your services to our great country." Yeah, I'm sure this individual really gives a crap about that. "I understand that you are looking for a contact email for this office. We also have a Facebook page as well as a Hocking County Sheriff's Office website page and app available online." And then the email that I referenced before was provided here. This is the Major's email address as well. Let me know if you have any further questions. So that's interesting that this person is stating that this .org email address is also the, quote, Major's email address for an alleged government outfit, not .gov. Now, this email that I am reaching out to is, in fact, a .gov account, and the original response of what should be noted here is done in the most standard professional format as has been considered by most of these alleged entities in the past, right? Which is a proper signature with letterhead or insignia or whatnot, those types of things. And then a disclaimer. That's fairly standard. And then, of course, relative contact information, of which not very much is provided here. But this is a small regional office, at least it appears to be. Anyway, I responded that fantastic. Thank you very much for the proper response. Strangely, I couldn't find any of that information on Google. Anyway, I appreciate the response and the provided information. And of course, I signed it. And then after I got this contact information from this person, I went ahead and sent that original email. So let's go ahead and look at the responses. First off, I did not get a response from the email address originally provided. And so I sent an email again to this Leif Bickle and got no response after this one, but I stated, "Hello, I reached out earlier requesting the standard email address for the Hocking County Sheriff's Office. My name is Stephen Coleman-Roush, and unfortunately, I have not received a response back from the email address provided. I sent an email out on the 2nd of this month to the email at that address and believe standard turnaround time for emails would be 3 to 5 business days. Please, could you let me know if there's an alternative email address?" And of course, I got no responses back from that Hocking County Sheriff's Office, so then I went on to the Logan Police Department. In this strange event of emails, there is a significant gap in response time. So I stated, "Hello, I hope this email finds you well, and I'm reaching out to ascertain contact deals whether or not this email is current for the Logan, Ohio Municipal Code Enforcement. Please get back to me at your earliest convenience, and I hope that you have a wonderful week." And then I signed it. Now that I sent on May 7th, and the response that I got back was on May 8th, and all it stated is this is the correct email for the Code Enforcement Department. That's it. Highly unprofessional. And as we established before, the Hocking County Sheriffs, before they decided to completely ignore me, they know how to properly sign emails. So it's kind of interesting that these people are not. Anyway, I responded on the 18th that, "Hello, thank you for your email response, but I cannot confirm that it is correct. There is no legitimacy to this response, lacking a signature or any other general identifiable information. I apologize for the directness, but I cannot be certain that this email was not fraudulently sent, especially considering the rampant robot frauds that are being perpetuated today. In interest of confirming the legitimacy of this correspondence, would you be kind enough to provide relative details?" And I signed it. And then on the 22nd, so that's about 4-day turnaround on that response, and then the first response was a almost 1-day turnaround. Anyway, the response was, "I am truly sorry, but yes, this is the correct email for the code enforcement of the city of Logan, Ohio." Equally odd response. No information, completely frigid response to what I'm asking. So clearly, there's been communication between the Hocking County Sheriff's Department and the Logan Police Department. And then this is highly unprofessionally signed. There is no insignia, no nothing. All that's provided is a phone number so that they can play the telephone game where you collect evidence on basically just the runaround. And it's signed Bethany Neville. Now, what's going on here, and is entirely apparent, is that either there are 2 female code enforcement agents at this place, or they're using aliases. And I would say the second one is more than likely. Now, why would somebody who appears to be conducting legitimate business, legitimate responsibility, why would such an individual need to use aliases? That's something to ask yourself. And the reason why I say that is because my father spoke to a woman calling herself Sarah Claus. Some interesting aliases there. Sound like they're not very well made up either. Now I went and reached out to a third department and got an even more glacial response, shall we say. And that was the Logan Fire Department, where I stated, "Hello, my name is Stephen Coleman-Roush, and I reached out for confirmation of this contact, whether or not it is a current email address. Found this email off the Facebook page of the fire department, and if you could please get back to me when convenient, it would be appreciated." And then the only response I got was the one word, "confirm." So isn't that interesting? Clearly, these entities, they're communicating together, and they're covering each other's backside because they're clearly involved in some nefarious and suspicious activity. So this led me down a rabbit trail of looking into who could be behind what is clearly a conspiracy that is being done in other parts as well. And I'm sure many people at different local levels are experiencing similar circumstances. Well, one need look no further to find out who these people are getting their direction from on how to use aliases and run their racket of property acquisition under the fraudulent colors of code enforcement. And so we go to the ACE conference, that's two A's, AACE conference. And under Council section, they have the International Code Council, ICC Education, ICC Campus Online, Women in Code Enforcement, and then under Concerned Citizens, Citizens Against Ugly Street Spam, Make a Difference, Keep America Beautiful. Then we have, under Safety Boards, Code Enforcement Officer Safety Foundation, U.S. Chemical Safety Board. Under State Code Enforcement Associations, we have California Association of Code Enforcement Officers, Colorado Association of Code Enforcement Officers, Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officials, Code Enforcement Association of Texas, CEAT, Code Enforcement League of Arizona, Code Officials Association of Alabama, Code Enforcement and Zoning Officials Association Maryland, Florida Association of Code Enforcement, Georgia Association of Code Enforcement, Illinois Association of Code Enforcement, Kansas Association of Code Enforcement, Michigan Association of Code Enforcement Officers, Missouri Association of Code Enforcement, and Mississippi Association of Code Enforcement. Then we have the Kansas Association of Code Enforcement, I already read that, Minnesota Association of Housing Code Officials, Nebraska Code Officials Association, North Carolina Association of Housing Code Officials, Oklahoma Code Enforcement Association, Oregon Code Enforcement Association, Ohio Code Enforcement Officials Association, Washington State Association of Code Enforcement, South Dakota Association of Code Enforcement. So what this is telling us is that there is naturally a direct international link to these code enforcers. And here's their general racket. You have a handful of what are likely lawyers, but either way they're just paper pushers and they hide behind facades, paper constructed facades, or facades constructed out of paper. And they go around and they make up pretext to rob people of their property, naturally assessing the value and putting them on condemnation lists and other things like that. And then when they take that person's property for, quote, not being up to code, then they can sell that at auction. Now, I expect that these code enforcers do not only relate to, quote unquote, municipal codes, building codes, or zoning codes, or any of that stuff, but in fact, the entire codification in general, where you seem to have all of these constantly living code systems going around that refuse to recognize the sovereignty and applicability of the U.S. Constitution, the quote, supreme law of the land. Of course, they also ignore and do not recognize any of the state constitutions because their only purpose is to enforce international codes which come from the International Code Council. And so let's look into this further. Under the corporate filings for this particular entity, we find the Ohio Code Enforcement Officials Association, written out all caps. And this document lists someone named Candy C. Thomas as treasurer, and it was received February 1st, 2001. Next, we have the trade name filing for OCEOA, so the initials for the Ohio Code Enforcement Officials Association. And this one received, or the signature dated the first January 25th, 2011, and this lists Donald H. Tate as treasurer. Very interesting. Well, according to the Board of Trustees, the current list of, trustees and officers is given, allegedly. which has someone different for treasurer. It states that the board treasurer is someone named Lisa Colwell, who's a code enforcement / inspection services manager with the National Inspection Corporation, providing contracted code enforcement services to communities in Southwest Ohio. Now, how much would you want to bet that the individual person that runs around with aliases and occupies all these various roles and whatnot are the ones that provide, quote, enforcement services to communities in Southwest Ohio? Now, how much would you want to bet that those communities are specifically groups of titled, quote unquote, elites whose entire purpose is to rob people of their property? And naturally, you have a corporate angle here where you have all sorts of different ways that you can find conflicts of interest, people that are operating in quote unquote public capacities that profit from what they're doing, which is all sorts of criminal. Now, if you look up Lisa Colwell's LinkedIn page, the National Inspection Corporation, there is virtually no information on it, and would, logically speaking, be a facade, an alias, a individual that does not actually exist within reality, somebody adopting a persona, and could possibly be even the same person that parades around as, quote, Bethany Neville or Sarah Claus or any other name they want to come up with. There's no real way to know or confirm it because, again, when you try to contact these people, they don't provide any information to follow up. They're clearly hiding stuff, and it just about always has to do with money laundering and other sorts of fraudulent criminal activity. So, when you look up the original articles of incorporation on this entity, unfortunately, most of it is very difficult to read. There's a few parts that stand out, though. One provides a rather readable list of the alleged original trustees, and it lists 6 people. And those people would be interesting to look into, but for the purposes of this video, we will simply leave it there on this particular entity. Moving on to the next entity in the chain, under the business filings for the International Code Council Incorporated. This document lists a Dominic Sims as the alleged executive officer type person. And then, in the application for license or registration of corporation name, we find out that the International Code Council is formed under the laws of California. But that is likely just yet another link in the chain of shell corporations. But that states that the corporate purpose or purposes in the state of Ohio, well, that's the standard, but what was written by them was statutes and development, maintenance, and publication of model statutes and standards and the performance of certain services for the benefit of federal, state, and local governments in connection with the administration of building law and regulation. And there you go. It is plainly stated that this entity's and a corporation, that this corporation's primary purpose is to essentially establish law and regulation regardless of whatever is stated in the U.S. Constitution, the supreme law of the land. Therefore, this entity and all other people that are operating under it and for it are enemies of the U.S. Constitution and all the people within the United States. So let's look further. We have an interesting entity that is cited here called Docutech Information Services, Inc. And they'll come up later on. And of course, Inc. stands for Incorporated. And then this is signed Bob D. Heinrich, CEO. Interesting name there. And this was 2003. Now, next in the link, we have something called the Corporation Service Company, whose documents came up while looking for the International Code Council entity. Unfortunately, the document for this particular entity is extremely long, very useful to look into, but it is not provided online and would require emailing. Of course, I wouldn't expect a response from that email address to come back either. So, looking up Dominic Sims, it states CBO. So, yeah, that's an interesting title there, CBO. And is the Chief Executive Officer of the International Code Council. As CEO, Sims is responsible for the overall activities and financial performance of the association, including its 6 subsidiaries. And while he's doing that, he's also obviously responsible for creating the laws and regulations that we're all supposed to abide behind. Hence, he is the current Reichschancellor of the Code Enforcement Division. And obviously I'm using those things completely wrong, but you probably get the point anyway. So the original guy is Bob D. Heinrich, who is probably another alias persona and doesn't really exist. And I bet Dominic Sims probably doesn't exist either. But it states that he's president of VCA Code, Riverside, California, United States. And when you go to the VCA Code website, of which their affiliations are naturally International Code Council, although he was, again, the CEO of that particular entity, as listed on the filing documents, but also with the California Building Officials, CALBO, International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials, National Fire Protection Association, blah, blah, blah. And of course, all of these are juridic entities that could all be controlled by the same 5 people. There's probably more people involved, but the point is that it would actually be possible to have all of these entities controlled by a handful of people that can pretend like there's more of them than there actually are. But then you can't confirm any of this stuff because, again, the people don't allow channels of communication to be open, and they also run around using aliases and hiding behind facades and fake profiles and stuff. Anyway, it states that Bob D. Heinrich joined VCA Code as a senior vice president in 2019 and promoted to president in 2020. Yeah, it's probably his company, so it's probably not exactly a surprise there. Well, his company, in a sense, is in being a subsidiary of some international conglomerate that he's actually just a puppet of. Anyway, Ms. Heinrich has over 35 years of experience in the building safety industry. Likely not a real person, so you could give him any amount of experience that you would want. Anyway, he brings both public and private sector experience after owning several of his own companies. Well, if he's a juridic entity, then owning is a literal bit of a liberal use of the word there. And dedicating his time to ICBO/ICC for nearly 20 years. And blah, blah, blah. Same old nonsense. Let's go ahead and look at the Articles of Incorporation of Docutech Information Services, Inc. The undersigned, desiring to form a corporation for profit under the Ohio General Corporation Act, hereby certifies as follows. The name of the corporation is Docutech Information Services, Inc. So basically, they're the outfit or entity that works to create all of this army of juridic entities, meaning fictitious individuals that are only exist on paper, basically, and lord it over the rest of us human beings. Anyway, the location of his principal office is the city of Columbus, Franklin County, Ohio. The purpose for which is formed is to engage in any lawful act or activity for which corporations may be formed under Section 1701.01 through 1701.98, inclusive of the Ohio Revised Code. Now, naturally, they don't respect or even recognize the jurisdiction and validity and legitimacy, or nor legitimacy, of the U.S. Constitution, the, quote, supreme law of the land. Never do. They will never, ever, ever recognize the legitimacy of that document. Ever. Even though they operate within its name. Anyway, the maximum number of shares which the corporation, well, this is all going to be talking about shares and boards of directors and whatnot. But the next page will get into the interesting components of these articles of incorporation. Oh, but before we move on, let's go ahead and look at the 7th part. It states, notwithstanding any provision of the revised code. Notice that. The wording there. It states that any provision of the revised code is notwithstanding. Now, two things are going on here. Either the writer of this has no idea what they're writing, or they're not referring to the codes that we think about, which is would be the Ohio Revised Code, as was referenced earlier. The revised code is not listed as the, quote, Ohio Revised Code, and it's stating that the, quote, revised code has no standing. So there's some sort of interesting word game that's being played there with that particular line. But the rest of that just basically talks about shares and other things. So let's go ahead and move on. Under 9th, it states, a director shall not be disqualified from dealing or contracting with a corporation as vendor, purchaser, employee, agent, or otherwise, nor shall any transaction or contract or act of this corporation be void or voidable or in any way affected or invalidated by the fact that any director or firm of which any director is a member or any corporation of which any director is a shareholder or director is in any way interested in such transaction or contract or act, provided the fact that such director or such firm or such corporation is so interested shall be disclosed or shall be known to the board of directors or such members thereof as shall be present at any meeting of the board of directors, at which action on any such contract or transaction or act shall be taken, nor shall any such director be accountable or responsible to the corporation for or in respect to any such contract or transaction or act of this corporation for any gains or profit realized by him or by reason of the fact that he or any firm of which he is a member or any corporation of which he is shareholder or director is interested in such transaction or contract or act or blah, blah, blah. So basically what this clause is it's a indemnification of liability clause, basically stating that they're not liable for money laundering, insider trading, or conflicts of interest, or any of the other things that people review as untoward or suspicious or nefarious acts, and that the person's not liable. The director, anyway, is not liable, which is always interesting when they love to make those declarations of not being liable or culpable for fraud, basically. Anyway, under 10th, each director and officer of the corporation shall be indemnified by the corporation against the costs and expenses reasonably incurred by him in connection with the defense of any action, suit, or proceeding, and any loss by reason of the settlement of or by the payment of any judgment resulting from such action, suit, blah, blah, blah. So here's something to take into account. Where is the money for this entity coming from? Well, it's not, technically speaking, coming direct from taxation, as is often the case. Instead, they would be getting paid to do the services of creating an army of juridic entities. Those juridic entities would then dictate the rules and regulations and laws that all of the, quote, law enforcement entities are supposed to follow, and then they would pay into these groups, all with their own combined interests. It's a racket, right? It's racketeering. They're in conspiracy. And so they would steal people's property, essentially, in one possible context. There's many other ways that they could fund their ventures, right? There's many other ways they could acquire resources. But using the string that we're pulling on here in this, the proverbial string we're pulling on here in this video, they would steal someone's property through their codes that were established by a corporation. And then that corporation would profit off of that, and you'd have a bunch of money changing hands through different corporations that are all controlled by the same people. And then that money would find its way back to this docu-services thing. And then when somebody tries to sue them, well, all of that money that they got would be used in defense of the fraud that they're perpetuating, which could also mean that all of these entities that are profiting from these rackets, well, they could mobilize as an entire unit against one individual. And then about one individual who's probably a hardworking person who lives possibly even paycheck to paycheck and has to go like pro bono or pro se in these corrupt courts. Well, not only are they dealing with multiple entities that are fraudulently passing money together, but they're directly incorporated into the laws and regulations that establishes the whole governmental structure in the first place and the court system. So good luck with that. And then on the next page, we have original appointment of statutory agent, signed autonomous A. Kanawha, Incorporated, and someone named Kathy Masters. Interesting last names there. And then we have a registration of foreign for-profit LLC, Docutech LLC. And so let's go ahead and look at the foreign element. This, as always, we find when we go through the shell corporation game, looking into such entities as the Grand Canyon University and all their different shell corporations with the Gazelle Education and Grand Canyon Education, all these other things. Well, we've looked at multiple corporate entities and how their shell game operates, and it pretty much always leads back to Delaware, the state of Delaware. That is the viper's nest that propagates all these juridic entities that run rampant across the United States anyway, and lord it over people from the shadows, basically. So this is the registration of the foreign for-profit limited liability company. Here is the jurisdiction of formation is the state of Delaware, DE, and that's Docutech LLC. And interestingly enough, as referenced before with the Grand Canyon University Shell Corporation game, well, this is signed under Amy Brandt from Scottsdale, Arizona. So there's another funnel of the juridic game. And the name of the agent is the Corporation Service Company, which we referenced earlier in this video. Here on the last page, we get a reference to yet another juridic name that is used here, and that is Docutech International Services. And it is simply signed Kathy, but that's probably the same Kathy Masters. Well, there is a Docutech LLC in Idaho, and I expect there's probably one incorporated into every state across the nation. However, if you Google Docutech International Services, you will get quite a long list of different entities, and they might not all be the same ones that would be incorporated into this scheme, but they probably are. It states on the first one that Docutech provides a dynamic loan document generation engine, e-sign and e-close capability to improve loan document efficiency, compliance, and the blah, blah, blah. And it also states that it offers a full range of services, including regulatory compliance, print and mail fulfillment, technology integration, and implementation. So here's how they run the facade of having an expansive government entity when, in fact, there's really not that many of them. Well, they have all of these, as you might want to call them, artificial intelligence outfits, even though they're really not. They're just computer programs, and they run copy and paste schemes, basically. Looking down a little bit further, we come across First American announces completion of Docutech acquisition. Now, there's likely a money laundering scheme going on there right now. But it also relates to the United Nations Convention on Contracts for International Sales of Goods. So those are some interesting hits that pop up on Google when you look up Docutech International. And that will be the end of the road for this video, at least. Thank you. If you have enjoyed this content, please like this video, share it, subscribe to my channels, and check out all of my other publications. There are free books available at the link, and if you so choose, you may support my work at PayPal or Cash App. Thank you.